This is Bernita Reed. I'm here with Jerry Hoover or Geraldine Hoover.
Geraldine Hoover is fine. Yeah.
And we're in San Antonio, and it is April the 5th, 2018. I would like to start with her introducing herself.
My name is Geraldine Hoover. I'm a resident of San Antonio for now probably about 40 years.
Were you born in San Antonio?
No, ma'am.
Where were you born?
I was born in West Texas, Odessa, Texas, to be exact. And then I just traveled. My father was in the military. So I've been overseas and back and overseas and back. But I'm claiming San Antonio now as my home.
And tell me your parents' names.
My parents are Elijah Marshall Beatty and Juanita Beatty. Juanita Mack Beatty is her maiden name.
Beatty is spelled
Batty.
And your father was in the military?
Yes.
What branch of the military?
Army.
And where did that take you or him?
Well, when the family traveled with him, it took us to Europe. We went there twice. And so that was Bad Kreuznach, Germany, Bamberg, Germany. We were just in those little different towns.
And what years
we went in 61, and then we went back again. It was 60 and then 64, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
And what rank did he acquire?
Sergeant first class. Mm-hmm.
How about your mother? What did she do for a living?
Housewife most of the time, and when she wasn't doing housewife, she was a nanny. She took care of other people's children and drove them to school and picked them up and cooked their meals and cleaned house, did it all, probably.
Do you know any of the family she worked with?
I don't remember their names. Mm-hmm.
And tell me something of your education growing up.
I do not have a college degree. I went to college for 2 years. I went to a business college at Parish Drawns downtown.
Parish
Drawns. Mm-hmm. So I got my certificate from that, and that's the only thing.
How about your early education? Where did you go to grade school?
Grade school, yes. I actually started out in Gatesville, Texas. That's where my mom was born. That's where a lot of this history that I'm collecting up is coming from. And then when Daddy got orders to go overseas, then I went from there to a town called Bad Kreuznach Elementary School.
Where? Bad
Kreuznach Elementary. Mm-hmm.
How do you spell that?
BADKNEUZNACH. Bad Kreuznach.
And did you, growing up, was it a segregated experience or integrated?
In Gatesville, it was segregated. When we left Gatesville and went to Europe, it was integrated.
And did you experience racism? Did you feel
in Europe?
That tension either in Gatesville or in?
Not in Gatesville at all. A little bit of it in Europe, but really wasn't. We were received quite well among the German people. We had a real good rapport with them, but it was some of the students that I came in and encountered with that had some. They never called me the N-word, but they were just bullies and that kind of stuff.
And were these other military,
mm-hmm.
so Americans?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You say that in Gatesville that you didn't experience any racial tension or segregation, or maybe you did, but not segregation.
Right. it was a separate line. We stayed on one side of the track, as what we used to always say, and then the white folks stayed on the other side of the track. So we just pretty much, my grandmother had a cafe, and believe it or not, she catered to everybody. So people would come from across the track, the white people would, and patronize her business because she was an excellent cook.
And what was her name?
Mary Brown.
And what type of restaurant was it?
Barbecue. She did barbecue, yes. Mm-hmm.
Also, what was the tension that did you experience any? You say you didn't have much of a problem with.
Well, I was so young. I would venture to say my oldest sisters probably remembered more about that than I did. Than I do. I loved the town. I just thought it was wonderful. I didn't realize that it was so small until we up and packed up and went to Europe and came back. But we would go to different little lakes and have barbecues or whatever, and it was always away from Gatesville. And then that's when we start experiencing people being very ugly, using the N-word and stuff like that. And so Daddy would always just tell us, ignore them. And if it got too bad, then we would just leave. Mm-hmm.
And what was it about Gatesville that made you fall in love with it?
Well, I just had I always thought of it as a wonderful experience with my grandmother was just wonderful. I had a cousin that was going to join us this morning. Her name is Betty Bell. She's like a sister to me. We always had great times together. We worked in huge gardens, and we thought that they were huge, and we pretty much still to this day think that they were pretty huge. And then we would help out in the community, like if we had a relative, we did have another relative that had a cafe, and we would have this wagon whenever she'd go and get her groceries and stuff, would walk with her all the way from the grocery store to her cafe and help her take all that inside her cafe. So it was just some fun times, and most of our entertainment was centered, the church was the center of it all. So if we had a baseball game, it was a field or something, maybe close by the church, or we would play there, or we would just have church functions where it involved having maybe a little picnic on the ground. Most of our entertainment came from there. We were in the church choir, so we just had a fun time.
What's the name of the church?
Sweet Home Baptist Church. Mm-hmm.
Do you know the history of that church?
I do not know the history of that church in as much as I know about the one in Lincolnville. That became a church when African Americans started moving from Lincolnville to the town Gatesville, because this church that I have the photo of is in the country.
And what is the history of that area? Do you know much about?
Of Lincolnville? Okay.
And Gatesville.
Okay. So when they were emancipated, and when I say they, I mean African Americans, when they were emancipated, they were given land 4 miles west of Gatesville. And the problem that they were facing was, of course, it was undeveloped land, and by far the worst, probably, that they would have to really cultivate and really work with in order for it to become livable. Because at the time that they were given the land, it was definitely not livable. So minimal tools, minimal of everything. There was not a place like they'd go up and throw up a tent or anything. Now, this is my understanding, that they either slept on the ground or they slept in the wagon. They only had about 1 or 2 wagons. But the overseer that was at this particular slave master's house was the one that was in charge of making sure that things went well. And from there, a community was built. And this is where I discovered my great-great-grandfather, Silas Snow, because he couldn't read or write, but on this deed that they had when they built the church and the school, his name is on there. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Do you know the slave masters?
Yes.
The history?
So the slave master for my great-great-grandfather, Silas Snow, was the Murrells, Murrell. So they were living, he was not living in Gatesville, he was living in a small town called Ireland, Texas. And so when they discovered that they were free, in this town next to Ireland is Hamilton County, and they were told that they were not going to be given any land, and if they were going to be considered as free, they did not want them to live among them. So they were asked to leave. So that's what happened in that respect. So they left, walking or in the wagon or whatever they were pulling with them. And then they walked all the way to Gatesville. So that was an amazing story there. And so then the other relatives that the slave masters were quite, I venture to say they were a little bit more nicer than the ones that was in Hamilton County, because he gave up acres of land.
What was his name?
Judge Mayberry. But the deeds or the census or any of the documents that I've ever looked at, it wasn't like they had really been given that land, because they eventually paid for it all. They paid so much each time they earned money, and that's how the land, and they had hundreds and hundreds of acres of land. So they were just really buying it up. And it still exists to this day, but we only have one house on the property, and I have that photo in the book, and it's 130 something years old now.
Did you want to show
it's probably in this one here.
one?
This one. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to show that. The Birthmasons were responsible for putting this house together, and it still exists.
Were there Birthmasons in your family?
I'm going to say yes, only because we seem to be related to everybody. It was a lot of intermarrying going on back there. So I'm going to say yes. It was in the family.
And this is Silas Brown?
Silas Snow.
Silas Snows?
Yes.
Seeing Brown here. Sorry.
Okay.
Do you know the first name of Muriel?
Yes. Okay, I have that listed as well. I'm sorry.
No, take your time. We aren't rushing.
Okay. I haven't.
They're wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Family
We do it
history.
for family reunions, and hopefully, they'll look at it and review it and discover some things that they never knew about the family that will kind of inspire them a little bit.
Does the museum SAAACAM have copies of these?
Not of that, no ma'am.
Are you selling these?
I do. I sell them to family members. Uh-huh.
And how much are they?
With the print, I don't, they actually run $35 because most of them have a lot of color.
picture.
Yeah, and that's where the cost comes in. But I find some of the black and white. There's a copy of it. There's the house.
Goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Now,
that looks like it's stone. Too.
yes, yes,
Oh, I
yeah.
can see why that's still there. Raise it up just a little bit, a little down.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me a lot of the ranch house that we've been looking at.
Okay.
That, it's on Texas A&M. That's a Mitchell, Asa Mitchell home. I mean, it's the same style, same stone.
Oh, really?
It looks similar to me, but maybe that's typical of this area.
Mm-hmm.
Too.
Mm-hmm. Well, now I understand when they were given all of this land, it was loaded with rocks. And they were right next to the Leon River, and that area had lots of rocks and stuff. So they were doing a lot of hauling at that particular time to get all those rocks. But these are the houses that were mainly built. Look like
Now that's a slave cabin or a home for
And-
free.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the story of after slavery that the murals wouldn't.
The murals gave their slaves land, but it was not in this town called Hamilton. But what happened was we cannot locate any area that they ever stayed in, because of the story we heard was they didn't stay at all.
The
Most
slaves
did not. Yeah, they just went to those that wanted to remain with some of the slave masters remained with them. Others walked to Gatesville.
And this was a freedmen's town.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing I kind of get a little sidetracked on, because I understand that there were only 5 of those communities that existed in the state of Texas, and our ancestors are one of them. And then later on, as I moved on into the study of it all, they said it was more than just 5. So I don't know. I don't know what to.
Now, is it typical, because not always do the slave masters give land, although that was asked. Did you find that was unique to Muriel to have given that to, he gave land to
Right.
each of his slaves?
Right. Well, I think it was kind of like the same way Judge Mayberry did. It was just an acreage of land that they all moved on. I don't think it was like divide up, well, you take this amount. No, it was just a huge acreage of land. So I think that's pretty much how they gave up the land.
And once they started clearing the land and all, what were the stories that you heard?
Beautiful stories. And most of the stories are written up in these little books in Gatesville from white people that said it became the prettiest little village in that particular county. And it multiplied with a lot of children being born, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. Before long, they had 2 stores, they had a church, they had a school, and then, of course, all of the people that lived out there. They had their own farmland, and they had their own vegetable gardens. And as many times as I'm sure we visited that area, I just never knew it was called Lincolnville until I got much older, because I could remember the orchards, like peach orchards and stuff like that. And it was just we used to play in the rows. It was just so beautiful. So I remember that much, absolutely. But so far as the houses and all of that, no.
And it was named for Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
What made them change the name to Gatesville? Do you know?
They didn't change it. Gatesville is the actual town that they were slaves in.
Oh,
And so when they were set free, they were brought, those that wanted to leave Gatesville were put out into this area that they named Lincolnville.
so Gatesville is
A town.
And whites also live there.
Right, right.
But it's a segregated town.
Yes,
And the initial freedmen's town was Lincolnville.
right. Hmm.
And then some of these people migrated back to Gatesville.
Yes. Haven't gotten the story on why that really happened, other than maybe the convenience of walking to the store when you needed it. Because my understanding is some of the ancestors kept working for their slave masters to generate money, and when they did that, they would have to walk a lot of the times long distances, and so whenever they did their ironing or whatever they were doing, they had to walk to that person's house and then walk back, and a lot of them ended up walking almost 12 miles for that day, and that's a lot. Mm-hmm.
And the church that you have the picture of, that's in Lincolnville?
That's in Lincolnville.
Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Let's get to that.
You want me to hold it?
Yes, I'm gonna grab it for you.
Okay. Okay. All
You
right.
can just hold that
Okay.
in your lap and I'll come down to
Okay.
it. Tell me about this picture.
Well, this picture are the first founders of, I call it the first founders, but they are the ones that are instrumental in building Lincolnville. And so here we have the Weatherlys, we have the Sneeds, we have the Snows, we have the Mayberries, and we have just a whole slew of African Americans that were very instrumental in whatever they did in helping out their slave masters. They brought that talent to Lincolnville and put it to good use in building their community. So like I said, there were brick masons, there were just regular people that build the log cabins and all of that. So they put that to good use and started building their own communities.
Now I'm hearing the Sneed name, and I think Edwin Glosson mentioned that name. I might be wrong,
Really?
but I was just wondering if you had heard of any connection
I had
to
not.
that. I might be wrong,
I had not.
but
Well, we found some Easleys. Now, Easleys were a part of this community as well. And that I was at a funeral home and they had a Black History program going on. So they set out some of their older books where folks had passed on, and I found some Easleys in that. So I do know that it was a lot of Easleys. And some of them went to Oklahoma, and some of them just scattered all around, went to California and all over the state of Texas, seemed like.
do you know any of the stories from slavery of this community, of what happened in the community?
In this particular community, I know some stories that's been told to me, and that was that they basically lived a lot off of the land. So they dealt with the wild hogs, the wild turkeys, the tomatoes that would grow, the Mustang grapes that would grow. And so as I took that tour with them to Lincolnville, we've had several tours to go to Lincolnville. Those are the stories that they would start talking about, the cousins and their snows, their first cousins. So, but one interesting topic that they brought up, there were these huge rocks, looked like they were just really huge flat rocks. And so they were like stacked on top of each other. And we asked that question, what are these some of the rocks you guys had to deal with in getting it cleared off? And so one of the stories that one of the cousins told was that there's a history behind that, those two big slabs of rocks. And I said, wow, I'd love to hear it. So when he told it, he said that his father used to take the rats and drop, it was rattlesnakes underneath there, and he would drop the rats in the hole. And I said, was there a reason you wanted to have them stay alive? Or, I would think that you would want to kill them off because they're so deadly. But he talked about the skin of a rattlesnake made him some extra change. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, and scary all at the same time. It was scary to me. I just have to miss that little bit of change because it was just an area that was pretty much loaded with rattlesnakes and all other kinds of stuff that they had to deal with. So it's just something to hear the story. I like to share it with the younger folks because to me it's my inspiration, and I'd love to think that I'm inspiring some of our younger kids to know that they made it and they did a wonderful job when they did get to where they were trying to go. That community now is in high demand because the base, Fort Hood, is next to Gatesville. And so a lot of people that are either making that part of the Texas their home, they're trying to buy up the land. So we have one cousin that still have over 500 acres. So he's not selling his as rapid as the other parts of Lincolnville is selling out. But
what does he do on the land?
Nothing. I mean, he's got the house that I showed you. That's his parents' house.
The stone house?
So he wants to have that renovated one day. He put another house on the premises because, I'm sorry, I'll take that back. He leases out part of the property for people that come and do shooting for turkeys or deers or something like that. So he leased that out.
And how about Lincolnville? What's happening there?
That is Lincolnville that I'm talking about.
It's like a suburb of Gatesville.
It's eventually going to be because the houses that they're building out there is just spectacular. I just love them. I mean, it's just so much land, and then they just have so much open space. They have not cut down all of the trees that are on that property. They have actually built their houses kind of to complement the trees, or the trees to complement the houses. But they're such huge shade trees, and that was one of the things that our cousin pointed out to us. He pointed out to us 2 trees that were at least 200 years old, and they were pecan trees, and they still had very good pecans that it yield every year.
And is there anything being done to preserve this history of the Freedmen's village?
It is, and that book, the other one, right there. So this was our latest one, and we went to Gatesville because the museum has a a lot of history that they're trying to collect off of the African Americans, but they're not really cooperating in giving them a lot of photos and stuff, and it's very difficult for me to get them as well. So when I do get something, I try to share it with the museum because I think it's something we really need to have for folks to view. But so they did a plaque. I was trying to get you to the plaque here. And this plaque is now sitting right in front of Lincolnville, the entryway of Lincolnville. Okay. So that's the plaque right here at the bottom. Uh-huh.
Down just a pinch. There we go. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So this is telling their story, the Snow family.
Mm-hmm.
And where are they standing in front of in this picture?
Courthouse. They're at the courthouse.
For Gatesville?
For Gatesville. Uh-huh. Because the plaque was at the courthouse. And they were actually, the people that wanted them to see the plaque actually took it out of storage, brought it to the courthouse. And after they did the tour for Lincolnville, this particular family reunion, he wanted them to stop by the courthouse so that they could see it.
It's wonderful. You want to put it back here, or are there other?
No, that was it on that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, what's this? Is there a downtown? Is there a main street in Lincolnville?
Yeah, a main street in Lincolnville. They always talk about a road called La Vida, and they say La Vida takes you right into Lincolnville. That's the only other one that I've heard of, but and it's it's a pretty long road that you take, but so far as it being a main street or a main road, it's still pretty much countryside right about now. Mm-hmm.
And how about the founding of this church? Tell me this church name that you have.
Bethel. Bethlehem. Okay, so the founders are Mayberry, Gus Weatherly, and Silas Snow. I'm not sure who built the church, but the stories are that it was a huge church. And from the pictures of that, you could see that it was a huge church. But around the windows, they did real nice decorative work around the windows. I've only been able to catch one or two photographs that verify that they were nicely built. Why it was torn down, I don't have a clue.
Do you know where it was located?
We don't know where it was located. The ones that knew where it was located have gone on in, and the ones that give the tour every year, they're thinking or they're guessing, and they cannot really tell us for sure because it's so overgrown, and they don't have markers or anything to where most of it was actually 12 families that started out Lincolnville, and then it grew, and then some of those families started going to the town of Gatesville.
Are you able to name all 12 families?
No, ma'am, but I got I got it written down.
In one of these?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be doing well. I'm not able to remember names well. What about the school for Lincolnville? So
the school, let's see, what came first? I'm trying to remember. I think the school came first, and they would use on Sundays the school for the church. And so it was a log cabin only, just a small little log cabin. The church was built in 1872. So after the church was built, um, I guess they just continued to use the log cabin for the school that was there.
Did this area have a Roosevelt school?
No, it did not. And I understand this gentleman was very generous in giving schools like this to this type of community. As a matter of fact, that's what my husband's family had in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think when they tried to renovate it, the school, I think they went wrong when they took out some of the older pieces of the school. And so it may not be as valuable as it could have been. But no, this one did not. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your husband's side. They're from North Carolina?
They're from North Carolina. I try to get him to get involved with it. Their history is so wonderful too. I mean, they
what's his name?
Hoover, Ricky Hoover. So they if I'm hearing it correctly, I think there was some when we say black stayed here and white folks stayed on the other side, I mean, there was some real strong tension going on. And so, but when they finally started achieving, like their educational goals and stuff, they were really heavily into achieving things. They got doctors and lawyers and teachers and that kind of stuff, and really, really interested. They, Miss Benita, kind of have your complexion. So they have a photo of their great-great-grandfather, and he looks Anglo all the way. And it was a picture of him hanging on the wall, and I said, look like he has light brown eyes. And so my sister-in-law said, well, no, they've often said he had green eyes. I said, oh, okay. So they have a lot of history that they do up in a book, but it's not as thick as that. They like little souvenir booklets when they do reunions. And those books are updates as well of anything that they've discovered in the previous years or something. They added to those kind of little souvenir books. But I just thought just to get a journal going like that, you couldn't go wrong with having that, because since we were related to everybody, how can you miss it?
Well, and just it's a great way to pass on that
Exactly.
legacy and
Exactly.
preserve the pictures. It also makes people want to contribute their picture to make it included the next time.
Right. That's right.
So that's wonderful.
That's right.
I'm wondering what else about that community. I imagine their stories growing up that you heard or things that happened. Did you have segregated water fountains, segregated?
At Gatesville? Absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Absolutely. You could go into the front doors of the buildings of any department stores. There was always a back door. You couldn't drink from their fountains. You couldn't eat their ice cream in their stores. Like if you got an ice cream cone, you couldn't eat it in their stores. You had to leave. And this thing that I never experienced was one of the older cousins shared that story with me, and I included it in our book, that they could not drink Dr. Pepper's, Pepsi Colas, or Royal Crown sodas. And I said, What? What was the purpose of that? And he gave me one reason or another. He wasn't certain, so I didn't put all of that into the booklet, but it had some. Oh, I can't even remember. I have all my notes on it, but they were not permitted to drink those sodas. They only drank the knee-high red, the knee-high orange, grape sodas, and that was it, and the 7-Ups.
I had never heard of that.
That's interesting, isn't it?
It's very.
Yeah.
Which cousin is that told you that?
This is the cousin that's on Silas Snow's side of the family.
What is his name or her name?
His name is Armstrong, P.T. Armstrong. Hmm. And he's 94 years old now. Yeah. My mother's oldest cousin is 106, and she's in St. Louis, Missouri.
Have they been interviewed?
We've done a little bit more than that. We've done, P.T. Armstrong has gotten his DNA done, and we've had the DNA done for my mom's cousin. Yeah, and they've all been interviewed for as much information that they can give us. But you can see there's a forgetfulness in some of the things that they're telling some of the family members, because the stories change a little bit. And so we chalk that up to just old age, pretty much.
So there's a lot of longevity around this area.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I used to ask my one of my relatives, what's your secret for staying alive so long? And of course, very, very a sweet response is that they were strong believers in the word of the Lord, and they, if you do His will and be a good Christian, you'll live a long time. Some will tell you that, while others will tell you that it's what they plant in their garden. They don't eat stuff that's out of the cans. They don't eat stuff pretty much that's bought in the stores. It's from their garden, so it's just different stories that they would, They don't take a lot of medication. They do their own home remedies, that kind of stuff. And so you have to go along with whatever makes it work for them, maybe we should try it too sometimes.
What are some of the home remedies?
The home remedies, some of it blew my mind, because they were saying if you got a cut back in the day when they were trying to live a good life, they would close it up with a cobweb. Have you ever heard of that? You have heard of that? I could not understand that, but okay. I didn't know how that...
I've heard of it, but I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But I've heard of it.
Yeah. So one of the midwives, and they had several midwives to deliver babies, and not only were they delivering babies in the Black community, but some of the white people were relying on some of these African American women to deliver their children as well. And so one stands out in particular because she was called Big Mama. And the story has it that there was a doctor there delivering this, it was a white doctor delivering a white family's baby. And when the baby came out, he was not breathing. And so she was in the kitchen. She overheard it. And so she asked the husband, may I have a chance at trying to make this baby breathe? And they allowed her to do that. So what she did was she dipped a pocket handkerchief into some tap water, and she draped it over the baby's mouth, and she blew her breath into the baby's mouth, and it revived the baby. So they're telling that story around the clock there in Gatesville, because if I haven't heard it from this one gentleman who says that it was his father that she actually brought back to life. He actually has a picture of her in a wall frame with his daddy as a baby boy that he says he cherished.
What was her name?
Her name is Brooks, Mamie Brooks. We called her Big Mama. And so she was one of the midwives. My great-great-grandmother was one. My great-great-aunt was the other one. And so it was a lot of them. So I guess they had to know how to do some stuff. Yeah.
What are the names of your other relatives that were midwives?
So Mariah Easley is my great-great-grandmother. Her daughter is Molly Snow, and she was the other midwife. And then Miss Brooks was the other one. And it was one more that's not coming to mind. But it was about 4 of them that were midwives.
And that was in Gatesville.
They were mainly in Lincolnville. Mm-hmm. In Lincolnville. Miss Brooks' Big Mama moved to Gatesville. So Mariah and her daughter were still in Lincolnville. I think I know that much because that's what they tell me.
Did they travel into Gatesville
They
to do the deliveries, or just
no, they stayed in Lincolnville, and the families that lived around Lincolnville, who were white families, came to them in Lincolnville. Now that's how they share that with us. Mm-hmm.
The white families would actually go into Lincolnville
Yes.
to deliver?
Yes. Yes. Interesting, huh?
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. One lady, when we were celebrating this plaque for Lincolnville, she just made it a point to come up, and she was 91. And she said, she said my great-grandmother, but Molly is my great-great-aunt. She said she delivered me. So I made sure I wrote her name down. I made sure I got 2 or 3 pictures of her because the next journal that I put together, I wanted to make sure that I had that information in there. But
do you remember her name?
Not off the top of my head, no ma'am, but it's recorded. And then 2, one of the white families that lives close by Lincolnville, I'm on my head to go and see if I can locate him again. But he remembers my grandmother, and a lot of the times he would come into town and go to her restaurant and her cafe. And he told us at this little celebration of the plaque that her food was the best food ever. He said, and you know how well I remember her, because when I went in there one time, she was trying to get everybody, all the black folks in there, to go and vote. If you're not registered, go registered. It's time for you to go registered and go vote. So he was really excited to hear. I was excited to hear that he had that to say. Yeah.
Now, you had started telling about some of the home remedies.
And
I shut you down on the cobweb.
Cobweb.
But what was the story that you heard about that?
That they'd take a cobweb from the corner of the house, wherever it's hanging, and then they would lay it in the open cut. Okay, so I couldn't get. That's as far as I got with that story. But when I think of cobwebs, I'm thinking of dirt and all that in there, dust and everything else. But if it worked, it worked. That's all I could say. The other thing that used to baffle me when I really do a real in-depth study on some of the census. Okay, so the Mayberrys had 19 children. Molly had 15. Okay. And so as I studied that, I saw that they were 2 years apart. And I'm thinking, My gosh, I know it wasn't no contraceptives out. How in the world were they managing to not have children but every 2 years? And so then I was working at a health clinic. So I took that question to the lady that worked there, and I said, help me out. And then actually I worked at a health clinic, OBGYN clinic. And so I thought this would be a good question to ask her. So I asked her. She said, well, Jerry, for the most part, they were slow to ovulate if they breastfed all the time. And I said, what? And so I'm thinking that if they're in Lincolnville, yes, they were doing a whole lot of breastfeeding if they had 15 and so many children, because now they didn't have to breastfeed their children and the master's children, but, they were maintaining that 2-year span. I thought that was interesting. That was very interesting. And it was a contraceptive out at that time. It was on a sponge with a little narrow string attached to it, but only the white families, only the white women were able to do that. And so Big Mama, she had a method of using a sponge as well, and that's how she was able to tell some of the women, or show some of the women, use this. And that will also prevent you from becoming pregnant. So I thought that was pretty neat.
The midwives would often be the ones that helped with that.
So you had heard about that?
Yes. I'm actually a labor and delivery nurse for over 30 years.
Wow. Okay.
So I changed bills.
I see.
So we have that to share.
Okay, so you have heard of that. Interesting. So the breastfeeding slows down the ovulation. Okay. All right, well, it's good to hear. Now I know she told me correctly then. Yeah. I wrote it up in the book anyway and put it in there. So,
I was trying to think of other things in that community that would be interesting to record. And as far as celebrations,
huge, always. And I'm sure you've heard of this, Miss Benita, but the cooking the meat in the ground?
Just as a Texas thing.
Is it a Texas thing?
Well, maybe not, but I thought it was.
Okay.
Is it? Tell me about it.
Oh, well, they would tell me that not that the 4th of July was their biggest celebration in as much as the 19th of June was. The 19th of June became the biggest event ever. And so men would stay up all night long cooking and the meat, but the meat would be in the ground. So it's always difficult to get folks to give me the details completely. I want to know, did they dig the hole this deep and how wide, and was there anything else in the hole? Or but that's the only story that I've heard, that they cooked the meat in the ground. The women would do all of the sides, potato salad, pinto beans, corn, all of that. And it was just a huge celebration. It wasn't a cost. You just came and celebrated the 19th of June. And you just ate as much as you wanted to eat.
And was this beef or pork?
Beef. It was both beef and pork, because so someone would tell me a pig would be slaughtered, and then I don't think it was cooked that, in other words, it was a preparation up to that time. And it was just celebrated well. As a matter of fact, I am trying to, I can't get all of my grandmother's recipes, but I have 2 of them that I think I could sell all by myself, and that's her barbecue sauce. Her barbecue sauce was excellent. So I've kept that recipe, and I hope maybe one day I can put it out there on the market. But
What's the other recipe?
it's a pie. It's a pie. It's called Baptist pudding pie. And it has nothing to do with pudding at all, but that's what it's called, Baptist pudding pie. It's kind of made like an ice cream, but it's very delicious.
Is it cold?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I can't go very far with just 2 recipes. I need to know how to know how to do a little bit more than that. That celebration was really, really celebrated well. I think they did a lot of, when it came to Easter Sunday, that was a big, huge celebration. And
How about Thanksgiving and Christmas?
Thanksgiving and Christmas were very big because at that time, a lot of the family members had already started traveling to California or going New York, wherever they were trying to get away, whatever they were trying to do. They made sure they put a lot of distance in between Gatesville and wherever they were going to. New York, I just talked to one because the gentleman that helped me to do my genealogy report on my grandfather, great-great-grandfather, Silas. He put it on the internet. I get every now and then I get a whole bunch of folks calling me or texting me or emailing me and saying that I'm related to Silas Snow. And I think, how wonderful. So I'm getting them from New York. I'm getting them from California. You know, it's just amazing. And my first question I like to always ask them, were you born in California, or is just your parents moved to California? And who are your parents? You know, so I'm getting some very interesting feedback on that. And
is that from Ancestry?
Yes.
That the tree is
Mm-hmm.
on? That's great. Now, how about for Christmas? How did you celebrate that?
So Christmas was splendid because besides cooking barbecue all the time, my grandmother sold cakes, and she had some wonderful recipes on that. And when she would start cooking for the family in Gatesville and the families that would be coming in from out of town, that would be just to walk in the house, you'd smell all this beautiful fragrance of food. And it was just wonderful. I thought, you know, it was just a time that we were always together. It may not have been a whole lot of gifts exchange, in as much as it was the fact that we sat at the table, always together. She would pray, or Pop would pray, but it would be a family celebration, and I thought that would be something that we always would need to keep going. And for the most part, we try to do that. Whether we want to eat or not, we ask everybody to come to the table and let's have a family prayer. So that's been carried on now for a good little while. She would invite a lot of folks that maybe didn't have family members to come by, and she'd fix them a plate and that kind of stuff. Very caring, very giving. I just thought that was very nice.
And what is your connection to San Antonio itself? How long have you lived here? And
Well, on and off, it's a total of 40 years. My family, my mom and dad, when they bought a home here, I just didn't really have any other place that I thought I would want to be. I did think about trying to go to Dallas and try to make a good living there, but the Lord said otherwise, and so therefore I didn't go. But what I've come to find out is that it's not as bad as I really think that it is, in the way that it's a conservative state. It's a conservative city. And a lot of the things that other people are experiencing right about now, we're experiencing it, but maybe not as much and as often as some of these other towns. Um, um, but it's getting there. I think we're having some issues with a lot of things that are going on, and I can appreciate that. Matter of fact, it's got me to the point where they got these other little small towns that are popping up outside of San Antonio that's beginning to attract me even more so, because you just want to kind of get away from the hustle bustle. I can set my clock by the traffic that builds up on a particular street of where I may have to go to the grocery store. If I forget and get to this street, W.W. White, I'm in trouble because the line is long, the traffic is long. That's what I mean. The traffic is long, and nobody's going to really let you in. You just have to wait for the light to turn before you come in. San Antonio also, I'm beginning to see, have a lot of history that may really, I may be connected with some folks here in San Antonio. I'm so stuck on going to Gatesville so often that I've actually slowed down. Like I was telling you about the book where I saw the Easleys. I've actually heard of some Davenports. I've actually seen some other family members' names, and I don't know if they're family members, but they're carrying the family members' last name that I know of from Gatesville. Mm-hmm.
So when did you come to live in San Antonio?
So we came, the first time was 60. The second time it was, we went, Daddy put the house up for rent, and then we went back to Germany, and we came back in 64. And so we've been here ever since.
And what are some of the changes you've seen? The civil rights struggle, did you witness any of that period in the 60s?
We lived in pretty much a all-black neighborhood when Daddy first bought here. I was not really aware of the fact that there were no, these were homes built up from the ground. Some of the other houses that they were telling Daddy to go and check out in the community were like old homes. And I think one in particular he was looking at was over by the cemetery. And Mother said, no, I don't want to live by the cemetery. And so he just started trying to branch out. And then he was told about a new addition being built that they were selling to African Americans. But the story has it that they initially built the homes for the white people. And so when the white people saw that they were going to sell to the black folks, they would not buy.
Where was this?
So it's it's off of Belgium Lane, and it's called United Homeowners Improvement Association, which we call UHIA. So it encompasses Meadowview Park, Meadowview North, and Willowwood. So it's predominantly all black. And that's where we kind of ended up. And so when it came a lot of times to do shopping or going to the grocery store, Mom did most of her travel to the base. She'd go on the base and get whatever she needed, or because there was a PX and there was a commissary. And so the racial tension was still very high. And I would hear Daddy say this all the time. When he got out of the military, jobs were just not available. When he was in the military and still wanted a part-time job, he ran into the same problem. So we see the change in that now. There's a difference in that. And this community that I was just speaking of, UHIA, is now a mixture of Hispanic and white Americans. So that's a huge change for us, because we were the best hidden secret on the east side because nobody knew we even existed. We stayed over by the railroad track. And it's actually become a very historical area as well because the Belgium farmers actually started up over on that street. That's why the street is named Belgium Lane. And they brought to San Antonio and America radishes and cauliflower, something we weren't even eating. And so, and then they introduced a new irrigation system that started up on these farmlands. And so the train track that runs right behind Willowwood is also historical because it started in 1877. So I'm just surrounded by a lot of historical things going on.
Now you said the Belgium farms?
Belgium farmlands, yes. It was one on the west side. They had this one on the east side and one other location. But when you would drive down Gimbler Road, you see these huge farmlands. And then they were just really growing all kinds of plants and stuff. So I think after they started developing the area, they discovered that it was time to, I guess, move further out. And they did. They moved into another little small town. I can't remember the name of the town, but the word out was that African Americans didn't know how to take care of a home. It wasn't in them to know how to maintain a house and maintain the yards. And so they said they were going to only give us about, I think, 10 to 20 years before the neighborhood would drop to nil and none. And lo and behold, thank the Lord, it is still thriving. Mm-hmm.
Now, is this the country of Belgium?
Yes.
Farms?
Mm-hmm.
How did they end up in your neighborhood?
Well, they were there first, and the home additions started to build up. So that's the development I was talking about. And then they up and decided, I guess it's time for them to move on. Yeah.
Let's see. There's something that had come to mind, and it slipped my mind now. It won't come back. And when you try hard, sometimes it just pushes it further, doesn't it?
I have a question I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
I'm working on it right now, trying to find how I can, there's not a slave narrative on my great-great-grandfather as it is in one of the other family members. But so the other family members, they're talking about the fact that they were a part of the Chisholm Trail ride. I'm trying to, and I know I have that gut feeling that so was Silas Snow too, but I haven't been able to capture any of that may be written documentation, or where else do you recommend that I?
I wonder what cattlemen associations, I wonder
There
where
was
the
no
archives
record.
are.
Archives, now Mr. Fly, I think, has already gotten some of that information from the Spanish archives.
Right. He got some of the ranches and the cattle brand.
Right.
Did he not find one for Silas?
No, he's been so busy. I haven't had a chance to really chat with him about it, but I am searching that out, and I hope to have one. Have proof that he actually was a part of it. And here's what the gentleman told me in Houston that was helping me to get all this together. he says all of the signs are leading to the fact that he was a part of that because he had 7 to 10 horses. He was not only recorded as living in Lincolnville, but he was living in Stephenville. He was living in Turnersville. And when he would leave, it said something he was reading about. It looks like he would take his horses with him. So that was a clue to him that he may have been a part of that trail ride because they would take their horses with them and change them out so they wouldn't worm out. When one gets tired, he'd change out and ride another one. Then the other thing that came up was Abe Blocker, one of the cattle drivers here in San Antonio. He would recruit only African American cowboys and Hispanic cowboys. Here again lies the problem. Was it ever recorded who he was paying, or did he just pay these people? I could not find that out yet. I cannot find, are there any listings of names at all? So I'm at a stumbling block on that.
Also, have you looked at, for the church records, any church minutes? Have you been able to find anything in the Baptist churches?
This church here? I have not. What would I be looking for?
Sometimes in a repository you can find church minutes.
Oh.
That would give you, even for Gatesville, maybe one of the major churches there. That would,
really?
Sometimes they'll list the Black members.
Oh.
So that might be interesting to just check. Now also for the Morrell family, that's a large family that owned plantations in different areas.
Yeah.
They owned plantations, I know, in Louisiana also.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And I think the Morrell family has papers at the Southern Historical Collection in Chapel Hill where we're at.
Oh no.
So that
really?
might be another place to look.
Really? How do I get my hands on that?
The finding aid is online, so I can.
Okay, you give me that?
I'll show you that.
Okay.
Specifically for finding records on the cattle drive. I don't know much about that.
Okay.
But I would check with the state historical societies and some of the archives to see where those papers might be. Okay. Because maybe there's a listing, maybe someone has included records of some of these drives.
Well, on one of the census, it said his occupation was breaking Mustang horses. I had that document in my hand, and that's how I wrote it up in one of our books. And when it came, I have so much paperwork until it's not funny. But that's the reason why I do the journals. Mm-hmm. Combine all of this stuff together. Mm-hmm. And it's not a matter of hunting for things, because that one particular document I cannot find. Mm-hmm. And so I hope to find it one day and make sure it's included into the book.
Now, the interview I just did for Joel Deems, he was also a Mustang breaker.
What?
And drove, he was the cook, so he would drive a cook's wagon. So there's something similar going on here.
Yes, ma'am.
But
I'm glad I mentioned that to you.
Yeah, and they have papers here, so we need to look at their family records to see if there's something that you can also check.
Okay, because the brothers, I don't mean to interrupt you, The brothers, it was three of them. And they're not, even though their info is here in the Whitty Museum, they're actually not in Austin, but the other side of Austin. And that's very close to Gatesville.
Which brother?
So it's Abe Blocker, John Blocker, and Will Blocker. There's three of them. Abe Blocker is the youngest son. And so he joined up with his brother, and they became the trail drivers for the Chisholm Trail ride. And so I thought, wow, I just need to, because like I said, in the slave narrative that we have on Jake Barron, he says it already, that's what he would do. He would ride cattle to the certain state to put them on the train.
Okay. So let's start at the beginning here with their story, because I think I've heard more of Silas and not as much about the Blockers.
Abe Blockers, the Blockers, they're white soldiers. They're white cowboys. They're white trail drivers, or however way you want to describe them. And they were always recruiting guys to come along. And the money became very popular with selling the cattle to folks that were up north somewhere that didn't know what good steaks would taste like. It's the story. And so when they started taking part in this particular occupation, they would recruit these different cowboys in different locations. But the gentleman at the Whitty said, well, it's interesting that you would say that to me. He said, because what is your great-great-grandfather's name? He said, because he may be listed. So I was so excited about it. I actually went over there to take a look-see on what he was talking about. He's actually talking about the guy that played in Lonesome Dove. So I said, no, this is not him at all. And so he said, well, the guy, Abe Blocker, was known to hire only African Americans and Hispanics. He would not hire any other race but those two races. And they got a big picture of him.
Did he say why?
That's a good question. He couldn't tell me either why he preferred to have African Americans and the Hispanics versus his own folks.
And tell me about the Chisholm Trail again. I know it came from here and it went up to Kansas.
Where
did it go?
Missouri. I don't know where it went after that, because in the slave narrative, he's talking about getting the cattle on the train to go to Missouri. So they had a trail that would connect outside of Austin, and it actually went, let me see. I have a booklet that kind of shows that.
One of these?
No, let me see. I think it was, okay. It shows that where they went, the trail ride. So one of the towns are very, very close to Lincolnville. It runs out it runs beyond the road I was telling you that leads into Lincolnville, La Vida. So it was beyond that, this particular trail drive that they would be on.
Now we're talking about in the 1890s.
Yes.
That time.
Yes.
Period,
Okay. Oh, okay. Looks like it's okay. Okay. Might be in another book, but I found a map was given to me, and it outlined a little bit of the Chisholm Trail ride. So I do have other books at the house I didn't bring. I just thought maybe. Okay. So I'm out of luck on that one.
That's okay. Learning.
I thought I had it. Okay.
Now, this is telling about Dovey Mack.
Yes.
Tell me her story.
So her story is she was coming up in Lincolnville. She became a very, very excellent musician, and she is one of the few family members that actually majored in music. So she is pretty much responsible for some of the musicians we have in our family, that she would teach them how to play. One of the stories that my cousin and I get so interested in telling the younger folks is that she could spin around on her stool while she's playing a song. She could spin around and come back to where she left off in the song, which was amazing. She was very, very crafty. She made beautiful roses out of net, and then she would use glitter to top it off. And so she'd make gobs of them for the church to sell, to have corsages. So it was just her and her brother, and that's who you see on the front of that magazine. No, I'm sorry. Oh, this one. Okay. So this is her and her brother, and the two people below are the parents. Mm-hmm.
And what is her relationship to you?
My auntie, my great auntie. Mm-hmm. Her brother is Booker T, and he is my granddaddy.
And do you know where the Mac name came from?
Do not. Have you heard about that? Where it came from?
No, not specifically, but I've run across that name.
Have you?
Before, yes.
Do you know about this, the Gazette? Okay. Do you know about the Gazette and Business Directory? Never heard of it?
For San Antonio or for where?
For Texas.
For Texas?
Uh-huh.
No.
Okay, so I went to Gatesville one time to do some research, and one of the ladies says, I have something I think you'd be interested in, because I found your great-great-grandmother's name in there, and some of her brothers and all of that. And I said, wow. So I looked at the title of the book. The book says Texas State Gazette and Business Directory. So I was trying to figure out, and this one actually, it was published in Detroit. So they sent it to the library in Gatesville. And so the lady was telling me about it, and she thought maybe it might be of some interest to me. So when I found their names, I said, is there anybody here that can tell me why their names are there? And so she said, no, but I'll give you a number that you can call. So I called this lady and says, so I found my great-great-grandmother's name in this book. And so what is that all about? She said, a lot of times they're in the book because they had a special technique in gardening, or they could garden 6 acres all by themselves. I said, is that right? And that qualified them to be into this particular book? Were they selling? She said a lot of times they were selling their produce, but it's because they had I guess the upper hand on getting those products, those vegetables out on wherever they were selling them. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Her knuckles on her hands, and I've noticed this with a lot of African Americans. You know that they were extremely hard workers, female and male, when you saw those huge knuckles on their hands, and that's what she had. She was noted for picking cotton and could carry the heaviest and longest bags to get weighed.
When was she born?
So Mariah was born in, I think, the 1850s. And she came from Tennessee with Mayberry, Judge Mayberry. That was Judge Mayberry's wives. She brought 7 of her slaves, and he bought some of his slaves. So the Easleys and the Mayberrys, that's how they got all mixed up there. She came with 3 brothers. Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful to have this record. Now, this Dovey Mack was born in 1901.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. She almost made it to 100 too. But she said, one of the family members said that she was really always concerned about when a baby was born. That, so, you know, some of their babies' heads are not shaped real nice. She made it a point to shape all of her grandchildren's heads. Tell me about that.
Heard of different.
Have you heard of that?
I've heard of people try. There's a debate about whether it's effective or not.
Well, she claimed that it worked. Yeah. So what was she just massage their little heads?
Well, yeah, or the way they're positioned in the bed or stuff, they would try to get it to not be flat. Or
really?
Yeah. They have some beautiful heads in your family. I just found this picture.
That's Silas Snow.
Silas Snow. I wanted to hold that.
Okay.
Look at that picture of him. Hold it down just a pinch. And back up just a little bit if you can.
So, Miss Benita, do you think he looks like he has Indian in him? Because the story has it that he does.
I can see it.
So when we had mother's DNA done, the guy was saying, now, come up a little, okay. The guy was saying, now here's the key to this whole DNA thing. Ms. Hoover, we got to prove that the Native American runs through your vein. And he said, now, so once we get your moms back, if we see that, then you can pretty much say that, yes, he does have Indian in him. And so we got it back. It does show the Native American Indian does run in the family. And so he's from Spey, Mississippi, Choctaw County. And so
Silas Snow from
Mississippi.
Which
Choctaw County. Know anything about that one?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I have run across the Snow name. Now, that I think there's also a Snow family collection at the Southern Historical Collection, so it might be worth looking at.
Okay.
Those records.
Really? I'd love to, yeah.
Many of them have finding aids, and then sometimes the records are already digitized, but they can also digitize for you if you need.
Okay.
If you can't visit us.
Yeah, I'd love to. So we're saying the murals are there. So are the Snows and the Sneeds are there too?
I don't know about Sneeds.
You just
it might be.
Okay.
But, I was just thinking that the Sneed farm was it Sneed? No, I might be wrong. It might. I think I'm getting that name
mixed up.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have some wonderful records. Are there other stories that you can think of? Things that you wanted to include in your oral history? Things that I have not asked?
Let me think. it'll be a whole,
It'll come to you.
after I walk out the door. Oh
For me
yeah,
too.
isn't that the way it goes?
After I look at it for a while and say, does it help you to thumb through these?
Well,
That's so wonderful.
it really might. I wrote in one of the books, and this may not be exactly what you're looking for, but we came across a little situation that happened with one of our ancestors. She was arrested for being an adulteress. And the lady that was collecting up all this info for me, she said, well, I came across this, Miss Hoover. I don't think you probably want it, but it says that she would be out on the street, I guess prostituting. I don't know. That's what she was coming. She said, would you like something? Would you like? I said, I want it all. I said, I want it all because it tells me about that individual. I said, and not to mention, I have to look at her lifestyle as a slave. How was it? And so that's what I wrote about in one of our family journals, is the fact that 11 years old, and this is one of the stories that I've heard about, 11-year-old were having sexual relationship with these older men. Okay. And to the point where, it was different men and one of those particular times, this young girl became pregnant and she started fathering children by these old men, old enough to be her grandfather. Okay. So, then as she went through that life period of being a slave girl and thinking about, okay, if I buck them or if I don't do as they tell me to do, then I'm going to get beaten or I'm going to get hung or whatever the case may be. So a lot of factors went into that. Why were you doing that? Or why couldn't you have said no? No was not an option for them back in those days. And so as they went through those type of situations in their lives and they became pregnant, and if the Lord was not present in their lives, they became very bitter. They became very hateful. A lot of all the negatives above became a part of them. So I just envision, if you're a pregnant woman carrying a child with all of those negative feelings that you have going on in you, you're going to have a negative child when that child is born, and you're going to have a hateful child. And so, but I wrote about that to say, that when she was bringing in young girls into the world, one of the things that she wanted to make it known to them, don't try to fight against what they're going to do to you, because you're going to find that a number of things are going to happen if you do. If you cooperate, you're going to keep food in your mouth, shelter over your head, and you, for the most part, will be just a little bit better off than most. Okay. But so as I wrote toward the end of that, because in describing this particular situation, I said, imagine with me. But I put at the end of it, there's great hope. And the great hope was when they found Christ. When they found the Lord, then they knew that, our life has already been planned out for us. We just going through the motions. And so as they kind of gave up that hostile feeling, they began to see the beauty of the rainbow, because it would allow them to have a better heart, a better acceptance of what they were going through. Now, my question to you is, as a nurse, do you think that they could have been, you know, we have so much problems because it worked the same for a mother that had a son or a daughter. They didn't want you to do too much. I have some pictures that I brought where the mothers were dressing the sons up like they were little girls. They were not girls, they were boys. Okay, so it was a method to the madness. Let's just say it like that.
And
Do
they
you,
did the opposite too, to hide a female.
exactly. So is it likely? Is it possible that you can be your the bitterness that you're carrying inside your body? Can that be a part a thing that can become a trait to your unborn child? What do you think?
I think, I don't know. That's an interesting thought.
Because when you see people say, "Well, she marked her child because she did this," and old timers would say that 50 million times. She did that. She acted this way. So if you can mark your child and that child goes through the rest of her life acting like that, then I'm thinking that, you know, this was a lifestyle that they didn't have a choice in. So we got a lot of issues to overcome. And as one of the pastors say, he was talking about the, what was that, Hemingway? The one that took his life, and his sister, brother or somebody took their life, and he had a niece and nephew. He said, break the cycle. If we just break the cycle, maybe we can start seeing a little bit better and acting a little bit better. It really gets me all wrapped up into this whole research thing.
There are so many lasting effects of slavery that we still
Exactly.
I'm just seeing that you have these records of
Yes.
the Murrell family slaves.
Yeah, that was found for me.
Incredible to
That
have that.
it's incredible to have this.
Well, it's wonderful to have.
Okay.
it.
This was
You
found
have
for me.
The names and the
Yes.
records and the
Yes.
everything just neatly spelled out there for Lemuel Murrell.
So one of the stories go on. He had. Am I too far back?
No, that's
One of the stories had to do with what I read in Gatesville about him having gold, and somebody was after him. Have you heard about that one? So not the Indians, it was some rustlers or something, found out about it. He actually had his slaves to hide it, and to this day, it has never. Now that's the story out in Gatesville. I don't know how true that is. It's never been found. So.
there's gold out there in them hills. Well, this has been incredibly fascinating.
Thank you.
And, your record keeping, everything so well documented.
I wanna always have that so that they can. It gets frustrating going through all those big books and if this archives that you guys are bringing is going to eliminate some of that, then I'm all for it.
And I think that they will want to get copies of this. Or is that possible?
Really?
Your
Yeah.
booklets?
Yeah.
Do you have them with you that can be bought, or those need to be bought at a different time? Or are you willing to donate a set?
I'm not going to donate them. I only kept what I could. I didn't. And I would have to get more. I'll think about maybe getting a couple of them reprinted. And then
they can be scanned.
Oh, okay.
If that's an option, if you're interested in that. But thank you so much for this.
Well,
I'm
you're
gonna turn
welcome.
off this camera.
Okay,
And we can
that'll
go
be
from there.
fine. That'll be fine. Absolutely.
Okay,
I hope
appreciate
that will we get copies, or we have to
it.
buy?
Of the video, you don't have to buy it. And I think we're supposed to work that out through Everett, but if not, we'll work it out. You can get copies.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. And then what are you doing?
Okay, we're back on.
Okay.
We wanted to include another little segment. And so let you start telling about which.
Okay, so your question was, were there some stories we could tell or I could tell about the lifestyle of some of our family members? And it just dawned on me that a lot of them were very superstitious. You couldn't jump over a grave. You couldn't point at a grave. You couldn't run underneath the ladder. It was just so many things that you could not do. And then we would, as kids, I guess we just kind of let it go in one ear and out the other. But what made us start being believers is the fact that a bird, when you just mentioned I still hear the bird sound, when a bird flies into your house, someone is going to die. And then this particular day, a bird flew into my grandmother's house. She was in the hospital and she did die. And so if there were any ways to make a believer out of us, that was one of the ways that it did happen, because you could say that a lot of us became very superstitious when it came to birds and bird sounds. It had one of the other things that was a problem was when an owl would get on your rooftop and make those kind of sounds, that we were going to have some bad situations to come our way. That was so scary. So I don't know where it all came from. I'm just assuming that it came from our African heritage, or the Indians, I'm told, were very superstitious as well. I think it either it helped us or it didn't help us, because they had, some of them would believe in the reading of the palms and would take it to heart. So we had one auntie that was just so dead set on, it wasn't enough for her to be told about different things that was going to happen to her. She felt like she had to pay these people to tell her what's going to happen to her in the next year or so, and she believed every word. So it was just real scary. And so that's what I wanted to share with you. I just thought it was kind of interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
Because I've never heard the one about pointing at a grave.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of stepping over.
So if you point at a grave, my aunt used to say all the time, bite your finger. And we say, why? Because you're not supposed to point at a grave. Don't let a black cat go a wrong direction in front of your car. If he went to the right, I think if he went to the right, wherever you're going, you need to cancel it. If he went to the opposite side, okay, you're good to go. That kind of stuff. So, and I may have that turned around, but we were mad at cats for a lot of times, because when we were getting ready to go to the park or wherever, oh gosh, this cat wasn't in front of me, so it was just something you kind of grew up with, and after a while, you just put it to the wayside, it no longer affected you, and for sure you didn't teach your children about it, because you thought to yourself, I don't want my children to be acting like this every time something comes up. But that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.